My presentation today is about the legislative challenges that horse owners have faced in the U.S. and how they have dealt with those challenges at the state level. The first question is, why are there legislative battles at all? You may hear of a law that's been passed and say, well, now how the heck did that happen? This is crazy, it makes no sense, and it is very bad in the long term for us to be able to keep our horses. Well, unfortunately, horse owners have largely ceded lawmaking responsibility to animal welfare organizations and/or animal rights activist groups. These groups are usually composed of people who have never owned a horse and have no experience with a horse. They are completely ignorant of the horse's needs, be they physical or psychological. Therefore, they draw conclusions about what is or isn't healthy with no basis in reality. As a result, we do see equine laws passed that negatively affect the ability to keep a horse. Horse owners typically only become involved reactively after a bill has been filed when they want to fight its passage. Laws that are created by the activists and the non-horse people are often in response to what they think is a problem. They think that a horse is suffering or being abused, and that a law is needed to prevent that abuse. The law may seem to be a short-term solution to the problem, but in the long term generates other problems that are roadblocks to private animal ownership. It's my contention that an effective equine law is one that helps a horse without thwarting or impeding rights of horse owners. Here's one example of a legislative battle that we've been fighting in the United States. This particular battle may or may not have already come to your country or to your locale. If it has not, you can anticipate that it will in the future. The horse-drawn carriage industry has been targeted for elimination by animal rights activists who believe that a horse in a city is unhealthy and that a horse pulling a carriage is doing a terrible work which causes them to suffer. We have this problem in many areas of the U.S. It's already beginning to crop up. We have 14 cities that have already forbidden horse-drawn carriages. 7 of those are in Florida. Florida is a state with a very large population of horses, owners, and a very active sport horse industry. It begs the question, why isn't the driving industry being defended and supported by equestrians in other disciplines? 6 other U.S. cities also are currently facing bans on the horse-drawn carriages. What is wrong with that? You may think, well, maybe this is a good idea, or maybe if they ban carriage rides, it doesn't matter to me and it has no effect because I'm not in that business and I wasn't taking a carriage ride anyhow. Well, it is a problem for one reason. It perpetuates the misinformation that a horse doing a job must be suffering. There is a real belief out there that horses not only should not be ridden or used in any type of business or work, they should not be privately owned. They should be free, living in sanctuaries. They should be wild like the deer. Another point to consider is that if there is complete success in totally wiping out this industry, what horse-related industry would be next? What common practice that we do or use in training our horses should be on the chopping block next? Once the activists have success in one area, they will not stop with that. That will increase their power and their willingness to go and push even further into intrusion on private ownership rights. Also, a ban completely disregards the fact that having a job is the insurance of a home for some of these horses. Because as we all know, keeping a horse is extremely expensive. And when the horse is doing a job that brings in money to the owner, that money is used to help that horse to be fed, to get shoes, and to have everything it needs for its life. So a ban, while it stops something that some people think is wrong, it certainly throws animals' lives into question. Where would they go if they can't be carriage horses? The law does not deal at all with the aftermath or result of that ban. So, in response to one of these ban proposals in St. Louis, Missouri, a group of concerned horse people got together and said, we need to do something about this. So they started the Battle of the Bans, as I call it. They wrote a rule that said that no unit of local government could control or regulate the use of a working animal. And they defined the working animal as one that performs a duty or function in business or in service, including animals for entertainment. The purpose of the Working Animal Protection Act legislation is not to say that a horse-drawn carriage industry would have no regulation. It simply says that regulation should be at the state level and not at the local level. This Working Animal Protection Act has been filed in a few states so far, but unfortunately, none of them have yet become law. In some of the states where the bills have been filed, they hardly have made it out of the starting gate, legislatively speaking. In a few states, some progress made, but still they were not successful. These bills did not pass. So in the example we just looked at, a bad bill is now being fought with an attempt to supersede it with a better bill. In the second circumstance, legislation created ambiguity that had to be fixed by amending a bill that became harmed or damaged. In Illinois, we have a Farm Nuisance Suit Act, and this protects agriculture or farming operations when it's an existing operation and a neighbor moves in and says, I don't like the way this smells. I don't like the flies. I don't like that work starts early in the morning on this farm. Because of the Farm Nuisance Suit Act, that new neighbor is not allowed to sue the agricultural operation as a nuisance. Here's where the difficulty comes in. In Illinois, horses, as in most other states, are termed or legally classified as being livestock. However, there is one part of the Illinois law, the Humane Care for Animals Act, where they're not livestock. Instead, they're called legally as companion animals. Now, companion animals, that sounds very nice. We all love our horses. They are very important parts of our lives. Why is it problematic to call a horse a companion animal? Well, the issue is, as I've shown here, can a horse live in your house? No. They need their own buildings, their own property, their own fencing. All of these are elements that are protected by zoning and certain agricultural rules, including the Farm Nuisance Suit Act. So if a horse is a companion animal and not livestock, it loses all the protections that agriculture currently has under the law. In the case of Illinois, since keeping and boarding of horses was not spelled out in the Farm Nuisance Suit Act, and because of the inconsistency in classification by sneaking in the definition as a companion animal in a certain part of the law, action was necessary. So the Horsemen's Council of Illinois proposed an amendment to the Nuisance Suit Act to be certain that horse boarding operations would be included and qualifying for protection. And that law passed almost unanimously, and you can see the language of it here. Is Illinois unique? Is that the only place in the U.S. where there is some movement to call a horse a companion animal? Well, unfortunately, that is not the case. In California, there has been such a movement, though it is not yet successful to date. In Kentucky, there was a realization that such a reclassification would be a threat to all of the hard work and protection for horses that were already provided for in state law. So in a few years back, in Kentucky, they cleaned up all the language and made certain that everywhere that livestock and farming operations were mentioned, that horses were included in the listing of livestock animals. So what can we do now? Are we as horse owners perpetually going to be fighting laws that come into being that do not work for us? Are we always going to be in a position of cleaning up a law with the further passage of another law that is a fix? Well, that doesn't have to be so if horse owners and those in equine-related businesses are more knowledgeable and more involved and more aware of the legislative process and act proactively rather than simply acting reactively or not at all. If horse owners want to be involved and they want to have good laws that are helpful, what should those laws look like? Well, we've already seen examples of restrictive laws, which are the don'ts. They say that something is banned, it's restricted, or there are certain requirements that have been added now. As we've seen, at first impression, it seems like a don't or restrictive law solves a problem, but in the long run, this creates other problems, meaning horses may lose their homes and ownership is a lot more difficult. Instead, horse owners and interested people should be focused on laws that are the do's, the permissive laws, those that make it easier to obtain a horse, to enjoy the horse, to keep that horse. Laws that are permissive are going to be much more efficient and desirable than laws that are restrictive. We've already seen an example of the don't law, which is the horse-drawn carriage ban. What would be an example of a permissive law, one of the do's? I'd like to tell you about a law that was passed in our state of Illinois, which is a permissive law. We had a budget crisis a few years back, and because the legislators could not agree to adopt a budget, many things were frozen, including salaries and operational budgets. And during that time, the state of trails began to become very, very bad. The trails were so bad that officials decided that the trails would be closed because there was no money to pay people to maintain them. Nevertheless, horse owners stepped up and volunteered. They said, we'd like to maintain the trails. We'd like to do the fixes. We would like to donate the materials and use our own vehicles and equipment and get this job done so that we'll have a place to ride on state land. They were told, no, there is no law in Illinois that allowed you to do so. We did have a law that said you could come and pick up litter, but because there was no law that said you could maintain a trail as a volunteer, the trails remained closed. So in response, the Horsemen's Council of Illinois came in with a new proposal, and the law that they proposed is called the Adopt a Trail Program. And again, this law was passed almost unanimously. And so now horse owners or any other trail user that would like to come in and maintain a trail is able to do so. So we see that this type of a permissive law should be a first priority in drafting new legislative proposals, allowing an animal owner to work alongside those who may care for that animal's welfare in order to pursue the best interests of the animal. Our goal should be to protect and preserve private horse ownership rights. We want the freedom to pursue activities on and with our horses. When we can do so, we support not only horse ownership, but also the equine-related industry and the associated economic power of that industry. The means to do so is horse owner-involved creation of permissive laws. I'd like to leave you with this last image and thought. This is a political banner used by supporters of Abraham Lincoln during his presidential campaign. There were groups of young men who would march at night in precise ranks with torches and uniforms, and these were the banners that they carried. They called themselves the Wide Awakes, and their symbol was the open eye, because they said, we are aware of the political times. We know that change is needed. We understand what is happening, and we're willing to participate to make our country better. I believe that similarly, equestrians and those who support them should become more involved in legislation. They should be fully awake and aware and do all they can to help maintain private horse ownership rights and our abilities to keep and use our animals. Thank you for your attention.